when we think about what does this mean in terms of the size of the industry, the number of people working in it, those sorts of things, it's very unlikely that the outcome is AI will happen and that will replace all the roles. It's much more likely is as AI gets better, more people make use of it.
Welcome to another episode of the Advising the Advisors podcast. I'm your host, Bolu, and today we're diving into one of the most high impact yet misunderstood applications of AI, that is customer service transformation. To help us break this down, I'm joined by Nick Clark, a partner at Boston Consulting Group, BCG, it's commonly known, and a leader in the customer service strategy and transformation services. Nick has helped over 180 organizations rethink and reinvent their customer service operations through AI, agile methodologies, and digital innovation. His work focuses on transforming customer experience models, not just by deploying technology, but by reshaping how service teams operate or shifting organizations from a run to a change mindset. In this conversation, we'll explore how AI is reshaping customer service, the biggest mistake companies make when integrating AI into their CX operations, and what AI-powered CX will look like in 2025 and beyond. So grab your coffee and let's dive in. So first off, thanks for joining me, Nick. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bolu. Really great to be here. Thank you.
Likewise. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, it's finally sunny in London, so it's
indeed,
a good day.
Last 2 days have been quite delightful. Okay, so before we dive in a bit, let's go to warm beverages. So again, we have this like culture of like asking guests like what kind of coffee they kind of presumptuously assuming everyone just like drinks coffee. But you surprised us a bit by saying peppermint tea. Like, what's the story?
Yeah, well, very boringly, I don't drink coffee, which is kind of unusual for a consultant, I suppose. But actually, it's sort of because of the hours and the travel. So I stopped drinking caffeine back in 2018. I was doing a lot of travel for work there, going between London and Asia. And I was using caffeine to kind of manage the jet lag. But actually, somebody told me that's kind of actually has the opposite effect. It kind of makes it worse over time. So I stopped, and I had like headaches for 3 weeks. But I haven't really gone back. But it makes me very boring when it comes to conversations about coffee.
Fair enough. So there was a caffeine phase. I just had to check in that there was a coffee phase. Indeed.
Yeah. I certainly used to drink a lot of Americanos back in the day, but yeah, not so much now.
Nice. Okay. So let's jump in. So like AI is often like measured by efficiency gains, I feel like in the customer experience context, from like cost reduction, slow automation, so call handling time being some of the KPIs that are tracked there. How do you think companies should redefine their CX success in an AI first world, perhaps moving more to like a value driven mindset than just cost cutting, if you will?
No, I mean, and historically, customer service organizations have often been treated as cost centers in organizations. It's seen as, you have the whole value chain of, creating products or services and selling them. And then, customer service is what happens when stuff goes wrong. So it's sort of like, ideally we shouldn't have to pay for that. But of course, we can't control for the fact that things do go wrong or customers do need help with things. And therefore, actually, it's a value to customers to be able to make use of those kinds of services. So I think, what we see with it's not just with AI, but AI is sort of forcing people to think more broadly about the value and the role of customer service. And so increasingly seeing as, how can we, ultimately the KPI that I think is important is customer effort. So how do we make it as simple as possible for a customer to get the help that they need? And sometimes that might be, well, can we be more proactive about it? Like, we don't wait for the customer to contact. We work out that they might need help and reach out to them. Or it's when they do need help, do we give them the answer instantly? Do they not have to, be passed between lots of different people? And so, if you can get that right, companies that really get that right, they grow market share. I mean, they gain customers from their competitors. But that's a really strategic decision that needs to be made. I mean, often it really needs to come from the top, from the C-level to say this is the strategy we want to take for our customer experience, and that's the investment that we're willing to make to get there.
How do you imagine organizations like CX units could think about like growing or acquiring this like diverse skill sets you need? I guess the knowledge management, to your point, like knowledge management isn't quite new, but it seems to be, again, like to your point, like it's one thing to be given a stack of books and told to organize them as against like going to actively go seek kind of like more like, yeah, exactly. So just like this diverse skill sets across like, yeah, how do you think about enablement for firms?
Yeah, it's a great, exciting area to look at the moment. I think what's really democratizing about LLMs and, these new foundation models is you don't need to be a data scientist to be able to make use of them. Now, obviously, you'll need some data scientists to get things set up in the first place and to get the products working and using company data in the right way. But to deploy them in different use cases, to continually improve their performance, those sorts of things, it's a technical skill, but it doesn't require a PhD to do it. So there are lots of opportunities to upskill existing employees to all of those roles that I just talked about there. I think we've seen great examples of that happening already. Something that we've been working with a financial services firm in the US, and a big thing that we did when we set up the AI transformation there was seconded frontline employees, so both the frontline contact center reps, also their managers, some of the people, say somebody that works in workforce planning that's doing the scheduling of the teams. They're getting seconded into the program, and not just as subject matter experts. I mean, they're there to actually help deliver as well. So they might be starting to design journeys, helping to run tests, those sorts of things, helping to source data from different
very hands-on,
areas.
you say?
Very hands-on,
Okay.
and then learning those skills as they go through. And so that's helping to build that muscle, those capabilities. It also really helps for change management. So, getting the people to feel that the AI is being built in the right way to help them. It's because, well, look, your peers, your colleagues have been helping to build it. Yeah.
This raises the point of, again, AI adoption in enterprises, like top down versus bottom up. Like how much of it is, again, you mentioned the financial service use case, like you coming in again to tackle, I imagine this was still CX focused, right? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
This was
right,
in
like,
the service center. Yes. Yeah,
Great. Yeah. So like, how did that, like, do they have like different experiments going in different business units, or did they decide CX is where we want to start, like seeing like AI gains from? Like how did that decision go? Like, again, is this top down indeed? And if so, like, is like, what are the drawbacks versus like something else is more, let 1,000 different like flowers bloom, if you will, in the org?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's like, so BCG did some research very recently, and we found that the real AI leaders, so the companies that have really pushed ahead in the last 2 years, they've typically focused on a small number of use cases and really pushed them. And so when we say use case, CX is often one of those. The other areas are where you'd expect, software engineering, coding, testing, that kind of thing. Also sometimes marketing, so production, marketing, collateral, that sort of stuff. Customer testing, those kinds of things. So typically, and we have seen, I mean, certainly, I generally work in CX, so a bit of confirmation bias maybe, but I think like it's usually one of the top one or two, particularly for large consumer-facing companies. It's the top one or two use cases.
On the point you mentioned again, in like walking through like the tactical like timeline for and like a 6-month engagement, you mentioned having like multiple pilots at the same time. Like, is there like a single? How do you think like what those pilots are? Like, is it like a single like thesis you're trying to test, or are they intentionally like uncorrelated to like test many things at the same time? Like, yeah, how do you like set up what does a pilot mean in this context?
It depends on the context there quite a bit. One thing that we try to do is think about the role, the purpose, like something that's good conversation to have actually is what's the purpose of a pilot? I don't think, you can look at a pilot as being like as a sort of completely like a double-blind scientific experiment, which, we're going to give this control group this, and we're going to give this test group this tool, and we're not going to touch them. We're going to just see what happens, like laboratory rats. And I think actually what we find works better is a pilot should really be, the question we're trying to answer is, how can we get things to work as best as possible? So what that might mean is, a team of people, a pilot team can vary in size. It could be 20 people, could be 50 people, that sort of size. And week by week, we want to try different things. So we want to use this combination of tools. So we want to use these tools in a particular way. And at the end of that week, we have a retrospective with the teams and we think about what worked and what didn't work and what are we going to try next week. And so we tend to run pilots in that much more interactive way of, with the teams, how can they help us and how can we work with them to continuously improve the performance until we're comfortable that it's something that's like a shippable product that then we expand to everybody else, scale to everybody else, rather than saying, here's a pilot and we have a success criteria and we're just going to run the pilot. And if it doesn't hit the success criteria, then we kind of, we stop, we do something else. Yeah.
It's like, quick, like tactical question, if you will. Like, I'm curious to hear about like the early days of playing with Gen AI or trying to use it again when it wasn't quite ready? Because I imagine, because as you know, like again, these models, like they've experienced a couple step changes, if you will. So I'm curious to know like how, like you've navigated again, like more broadly, just like the consulting or BCG itself has navigated, especially again in the early days where it wasn't quite good enough. Like how did you find the conviction to go revisit to say, actually like AI is just good enough to help like handle this kind of use case, and how, what is the plan for kind of like keeping tabs on like when, again, I think you mentioned things like the like full agentic interactions like aren't quite ready, but like how would you like monitor as that changes, and like how would you like be able to like revisit like, actually like we told you like last year it wasn't quite good enough, now they are.
Voice is interesting because it's lower effort than chat. So if you're able to interact with a voice bot, it feels more natural. It can be quite it's more suitable for certain types of requests. If you have a more complicated type of request, voice tends to work better. So a lot of companies are very interested in voice, and we're seeing there's some good voice bots on the market now that are out there and people are able to interact with. So that is something where, I mean, there's the demand. That's why I think we know that you can try and get customers to use chat, and some industries have very great success in getting customers used to chat. But ultimately, if we can automate voice interactions, you can really improve customer experience.
So again, just like taking back to 2023, the voice agents like weren't quite good enough, like fast enough, if you will. Like does BCG have like an internal like practice for like again keeping track on how like, because again like our recommendation in mid 2023 is not quite good enough. Yeah. Do you like exactly like how do you like keep tabs on the market to like actually they are quite now good enough if you had like someone
okay. Yeah, it's almost impossible not to keep tabs on the market. I guess one thing specifically because there's so much buzz around AI, so there's so many new reports and those sorts of things. But also, all consulting firms are quite entrepreneurial, so it benefits everybody to have individuals seeking out news, answers, those kinds of things. I mean, I write a Substack newsletter about customer service, so every week I'm looking for new information about developments, those sorts of things. We have our internal knowledge team who will be seeking out that kind of stuff as well. And often, sometimes just clients will ask as well. They're like, "Hey, what's the latest on this? What's your latest perspective?" So that's just something we kind of do, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so going a bit to like your background, you spent a couple of years in an operational role at TalkTalk, kind of like leading large scale transformation projects. So like how do you reflect on like that, like your time having like hands-on experience, if you will, and how does it like affect your perspective as a consultant today, kind of like again being from in industry, seeking advice and now just giving it, if you will?
Yeah, well, I had a slightly odd career shape because although I went to a good university and I had I went to a good university, well-regarded university. I didn't do so well in my finals though, so I didn't get a kind of big graduate scheme job. I ended up working in the frontline in a contact center. And it's not quite that there's been a straight through line that I just kind of got promoted and then I started running transformations and then I started working in consulting. But almost everything I've done in my career has been about customer service and customer experience. So the main benefit that I see now, having done that, is that I feel I have a good, in a lot of ways, a perspective on how the client is seeing things, how our clients are seeing things. So in particular, let's say it can be useful to be able to understand quite how difficult it is or quite how much effort is needed to implement change in a large, complex customer service organization. So, where you've got thousands of employees, some of them might work for an outsourcer, actually, they might not even work for you directly. They might be spread all over the globe. You don't necessarily have great data to see what's going on today with them. Like that's quite a hard environment to deliver change in. And I think, sometimes we need to sense check the plans to make sure that they're actually realistic about what can be delivered. So that kind of perspective is helpful.
So like two-part question, like what has and hasn't changed like post AI and like your day-to-day job in consulting? So let's start with what hasn't changed, what stayed the same basically. Like let's say pre-2022 or something.
Yeah, I mean, what hasn't changed is the importance of relationships. I mean, it's entirely about, I mean, for us, it's about delivering value for the clients and then going back and making sure that value has really landed, well long after the project has gone. And some of actually, the other great conversations I like to have are 6 months, 12 months after we've gone, and we'll sit down with the main client contacts I've been working with and say, so how did it go? And very often the conversation will say, well, these things you suggested, these are fantastic. In fact, not only have we done what you suggested, we took it a bit further and we did that. And I say, oh wow, that's so inspiring. And there'll always be, one or two things to say, well, yeah, this one didn't quite work. And, so we can learn from that. And it's a really great way to sort of continue to build those relationships. So I think the power of human relationships, and particularly after the pandemic, reestablishing that's I don't think that will ever go away. I mean, I think what has changed is our ability to the way that consulting firms work, especially strategy consulting firms work, is we will very early on in a project put together an initial hypothesis, and then we plan out how we're going to do all the analysis to see whether we can prove or disprove that hypothesis and do that. Lots of AI tools are quite useful for getting to that initial hypothesis. So we have internally a number of AI tools that we've developed. So Navi, which is our sort of knowledge navigator, enables us to, through a conversational interface, pull out all of the knowledge that's been extracted from previous projects. And that's quite a complex piece of work, because we don't want to give away, there's lots of kind of confidential client data, which you can't take from other projects, but there's a lot of kind of more general data, which is like, what's the best way to approach this problem? What are some of the best practices we're seeing across different industries? So that's what that's enabling. And we also have a proprietary tool we've built called Dexter, which is, it will, again, with a text prompt, it will build a slide deck for you. So, a first pass. It's certainly not something that we would then go and put in front of a client. Would put a lot of work into really tightening it up and improving the quality. But that sort of fast start is something that we've been able to get better at with AI.
Interesting. And like, what are you most excited about in this AI interaction? Is it more AI going deeper into the engagement, again going first from the start to like the middle, maybe at the end even, or do you think the start is the place where you're going forward?
I think our focus is with those tools, improving them over time, getting user feedback. So really focusing on those use cases and improving the adoption. So, getting more people to use those. I mean, I was thinking the other day, like, I think a brilliant use of AI for us would be a tool which you present to it and it responds like a client. So particularly, I mean, perhaps more maybe for commercial application, like for, if we're pitching for a proposal, we've got to come in and do a pitch, how we could, test out the questions that a client might ask us, or even, but like an important steering committee or something like that. I think so, it's a big skill that we train our consultants to do, is when you're producing materials and thinking about storylines, is what is relevant for the audience that you're presenting to?
Interesting. Do you have any experiments, like internal experiments, like to see if like, is it just like your like one of your personal ideas?
Not beyond. I mean, the other thing I see is like really innovative use of. We have we have partnerships with all the big model companies, but we use enterprise ChatGPT. And I've seen some really innovative uses for that. So yeah, one of the things that I do with that is to help prepare for pitches. So I say, given this is our, feed in the executive summary and say, what would be the questions that you would ask about this? So that's a kind of helpful thing. I know somebody who uses the voice version of ChatGPT as a sort of productivity coach in the morning. So she will talk through all the things she's got to do in the day, and then it will almost like coach her on like, what are the priorities? What are the things I need to spend the most time on? Those kind of things. So there's just so much scope for, this is what I'm saying, so much scope for experimentation, which doesn't, you don't have to like change your operating model to do that. You just need to kind of try stuff out. Yes. Yeah.
On the topic of like AI productivity, again, we're going to give you like two futures, if you will. One model is you have like AI, again, like in particular, like AI productivity's impact on like across the tenure spectrum, that is from the junior to more senior partners like yourself. Again, one model is it would slim the pyramid, if you will, right? Again, as senior partners like yourself become more productive, you kind of like, again, have less need for kind of like back office tasks, like have to need people like to contribute to that. And you have more value concentrating at the top, if you will. Or it's inverting the pyramid, where again, the relatively like less tenured members could again get up to speed more quickly with access to that institutional knowledge. I hate what project have you worked on in healthcare in the past 5 years. Something again like would require like experience, actually haven't been there to know. Now that they're just like one chat question away. Which of these two, what do you think these two models are missing? Which of these two do you think would be most interesting to pay attention to going forward?
To give you a consulting answer, I think the answer is both. So I think on the juniors, so BCG did some research with MIT and Harvard and Wharton, and we did some research on 750 of our own consultants, and we got them to try different AI productivity tools and methods, and we were able to codify. There are some specific tasks, often some of the more simpler administrative tasks, where AI absolutely improves productivity, and those things were very clear, 30 to 40% improvement in productivity there. And then there were some tasks, particularly tasks that required a bit more creative thinking, where actually, fascinatingly, using AI made people slower because they were not quite getting what they wanted, and they were having to kind of shape it. And sometimes it's just quicker just to write it yourself or do it yourself, those kinds of things. So I think at the moment, again, our focus is like doing what, rather than trying to do lots of things with AI, it's like on the things that it does well, let's really get that working well. So get everybody using the tools, get them comfortable with it, continuously improve how those tools are being used, those kind of things. So I think that's the focus there. I think for the more senior teams, I mean, everybody will say the more time that we can spend with our clients, listening to clients, finding out what they need, and not doing, back office admin type tasks, the better. I think the key is with BCG, as with most consulting firms, we're very entrepreneurial. Our partner, there's no kind of top-down corporate center that is telling everybody how to work. People experiment and share best practices based on what happens to the outcomes. So I think what we're seeing at that more senior level is different people are finding different ways of making it work, and then those good ideas are spreading because the outcomes are good.
Yeah. Do you think there's like an extra dimension here, I guess, more in the slimming of the pyramid model here, where there's a concern for again like continuity, basically like the talent pipeline, if you will, right? Where again these more junior people over time again will need to become again the future of the firm. Like, do you think that that's a concern as well to have about like the dynamics there?
Yeah, I mean, one thing to be very clear is that we're not slimming the pyramid and have no intent to do that. I mean, it's absolutely critical to the future growth of the business. Like, that's how it's designed. But I think it's more about saying there are different, like for new people joining the firm, particularly at a sort of a graduate consultant level, apprenticeship is really important for it. So learning through doing. And historically, one of the ways that we do apprenticeship is people write slide decks. And in writing slide decks, they learn the skill of telling a story, of structuring a problem, breaking it down, making it really logical, but also how to communicate very clearly through words and pictures and diagrams what it is that we're trying to say, and then adapting that communication style to, if you're presenting to a CEO or to an executive board, it's very different to if you're presenting to a mid-level operational manager who wants a lot more detail and maybe needs to be, whereas a CEO doesn't have enough time for that, they just want to know the answer, so those things. So the learn through doing is writing the slides. Now, I think there's, even with things like Dexter, people are writing slides because we want our slides to be absolutely perfect. So, we put a lot of effort into that because we want the message to be perfect, the answer to be perfect. So we, but I think like what we are seeing is a little bit more of that apprenticeship coming through in other ways. So maybe giving our consultants a chance to do more client-facing interactions. So maybe they get to sit a lot, they get paired with somebody within the client organization that can then be, a key person that they work with. And so it's thinking, how do we just deploy people in a way that enables them to flourish and learn and get better at the work?
And so you're saying like this again, like you're deploying them again like more to the front lines earlier than you would otherwise. Is this like a structural change for sure that's happened?
But it's not, again, like we're not a top-down command and control organization, so there's no directive that says we should do that. What I've in some scenarios, those are some of the things that are happening. Yes, yeah.
Those are most of the serious questions I have, if you will. Happy to just ask if there's anything that you'd have liked me to have asked you, like any interesting topic you've been writing on your Substack recently, or.
I think like a few things that people have responded to a lot recently. I think one is this whole thing about Jevons paradox, the Jevons paradox, which is, the more efficient something becomes, the more it gets used, and so therefore, the overall cost doesn't necessarily go down, or those sorts of things. And that's definitely something we see. I mean, that got a big a big outing recently with DeepSeek, and the fact, so it's like, well, AI is going to be everywhere now. But I think we kind of instinctively know that in customer service, and I think that's one of the things that we will see in future is the easier it is to access service. So if you think about, a bot which actually works, that's like very easy to talk to, there's no waiting, those sorts of things. The result of that is just more customers will ask more questions. Like they'll just seek help for more things more at the time. So when we think about like what does this mean in terms of the size of the industry, the number of people working in it, those sorts of things, it's very unlikely that the outcome is AI will happen and that will replace all the roles. It's much more likely is as AI gets better, more people make use of it. We'll need people to help manage the AI, but also the number of interactions is going to go up. There's lots of things that will drive that. But the difference is that those interactions will be more value adding. Like the human components of them will be higher value and more, improve customer experience, maybe, help to improve sales and revenue and those sorts of things. So yeah, that's more likely the effect that we're expecting to see.
Well, that's a good one. I think it was Satya's tweet onto
yes, exactly.
That brought into the public consciousness, if you will.
Yes.
Have a bit of like a fun one to close on. If you're to have, again, not a coffee, but a tea with any AI pioneer or like business leader, dead or alive, if you will.
Yeah.
Who would that be, you think?
Yeah. Well, I would love to spend some time with Ray Kurzweil, who
interesting, right? Yeah,
is famous for lots of things, but I guess like initially sort of in the AI world, sort of famous for developing, the singularity, like that concept, and being a real kind of passionate advocate for that, and really quite and he did a lot of development of natural language processing, natural language understanding, and a lot of the tech that went into Siri originally came from him, and then Nuance, who are a big player in both healthcare and customer service. They're now actually owned by Microsoft, but yeah, that was one of his sort of technologies as well. And he's also a very kind of philosophical guy, very, deep thinker about things and thinks about politics. And I think perhaps runs counter to some of the more sort of, some of the kind of Silicon Valley thinking. And I find some of that quite interesting. But I'd also like to talk to him for personal reasons, because before he did any of that, his first career was he built a company which made some of the early kind of digital synthesizers and samplers, so like music synthesizers.
Really? Okay.
And I'm kind of into all that sort of stuff. I have a little home studio at home, so I'd love to talk to him about music as well.
Oh wow, okay, yeah, he would be like the perfect tea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I probably need a few cups of tea. Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for spending the time, Nick. This has been very illuminating. Appreciate the time.
You're very welcome, Bolu.